Hello friends! For today's tip, I wanted to talk about starting and stopping tunes when you're playing with other people. I've written about this a little bit and you may have read what I wrote, but I wanted to give you sort of a demonstration of some of those ideas that I was expressing. So I'm going to use the tune Fireman's Reel. It goes like this. Just as sort of my demo tune to start things, to give us an example of what I'm talking about. So one great way of starting a tune is to just count it off. It sounds easy. It's a lot harder than you would think. What happens commonly is I see people say 1, 2, 3, 4, and then or much slower, where the speed we're counting it at doesn't really link up with what we actually start doing. And this does take some practice. Some tricks for working on that might be having a metronome. Start playing the tune at a tempo that feels comfortable for yourself, then stop. And I use a pulse metronome on my phone, and I just tap what that rhythm is. So if I was just playing at, I would tap that beat into the metronome. It would tell me how fast I was playing at. So if that's a comfortable rhythm, then I'm going to practice turning the metronome on, and it's going to flash or click at me, and I'm going to count along with that. 1, 2, 3, 4. And really practicing this skill on your own is an important thing to do because it feels a lot scarier when you're doing it in person, which then makes us much more likely to count faster or slower than we mean to, and then start playing faster or slower than we mean to as well. So really getting confident on what feels like a comfortable rhythm for me to play it at, and finding that in my body, counting that, and then being ready to play with that. Something I learned through watching David Kaner is that he was always kind of dancing a little bit first. He'd be thinking the tune and finding that dance rhythm. Of course, he's someone who's played for such a tremendous number of dances over the years that he knows, and of course is a fantastic caller, knows what it feels like for dance tempo. So maybe you know what it feels like in your feet to tap along, and maybe humming it and tapping it in your feet or doing a little shuffle dance, whatever it takes, but make sure to give yourself the time you need to find the tempo that feels good. And then really count it and kind of be ready. You can't count here and then jump in. Be ready. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I will also say there's a difference between saying 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. When I put just that movement in my body along with it, and I'm really trying to give a little bit of extra rhythm with my voice. All of those cues will help yourself and also help the musicians around you. Another terrific way to start playing a tune is to kind of do a shuffle. Might sound like that. What's a little funny is how long are you going to shuffle for? I could go, but there you saw I did a little quick head nod at you, and that gives you a sense. I could do it for twice as long. I could do it for longer. It's kind of a little bit my choice as the person who's kicking off the tune of how long I think I need to get really into my groove and how long I think my other musicians need to feel that rhythm. As another musician in that setting, it's kind of your responsibility to feel that same beat that I'm shuffling and show me, okay, we're all ready. We're going to be on the same page here. I like to sometimes do a bit of like a more of a chordy drone. And that's going to be almost always on the first chord of the tune. So Fireman's in the key of A, starts on an A chord. There are some tunes that start not on the 1 chord. A tune that comes to mind is called the Virginia. It's in D, but it starts on a G chord. In that instance, I would probably shuffle on the D, the key that we're in, and then real quick on that last moment, or on the beginning of the tune, switch into the chord. But for the most part, most of our tunes start on the key, the chord of the key that we're in. We can do some different rhythms. Just 4 there. Or and I would recommend having the bow that you're doing for your that shuffle intro sort of match what you're going to be doing with the bowing. So I might do a cross bowing. That's a little bit harder for people to follow. The long bows are nice, just the... but have a little less rhythm. It's a little harder to feel where that rhythmic kick is. A is the pretty standard and I'd say most comfortable, more foolproof way of jumping into it. Or even a... if I do that where it's all back and forth, I'm probably going to start bowing it that way, doing a... I kind of lose immediately all the momentum that I had started with. So just some ideas to keep in mind when you're shuffling. Sometimes I like to start way low. But there it's a little bit harder to get my fingers up to the melody after they've been down somewhere else in a chord. Don't feel like you need to start somewhere else. You can start on that first note. This, again, is another scale that's really worth practicing at home a lot. It's worth practicing it on a bunch of tunes, and I would strongly recommend throwing a metronome into the mix for yourself. The other thing would be a tag. Tags are a great way. And the question is always, how long of a tag should you play? Doing a... not very long. We generally need more than that last little measure. Those last measures don't contain that many rhythmic cues. Something longer like... that works well. I'm doing kind of, I guess, 2 measures there, but don't quote me on that. And that can work really well. Oftentimes on tunes, the ending of the A part is the same as the ending on the B part, and so you're using either one. I generally like to use the ending of the B part as my tag intro to kick off an A part. But sometimes the ending of the B part feels a lot harder and is just a more challenging thing, or is a lot harder for my brain to find, in which case I think it's totally acceptable to kick off the tune with the end of the A part. It might be useful to the people you're playing with if you tell them, I'm going to play the last little bit of the A part before jumping in. And that will help them know what's going on, but isn't totally necessary. So just kind of finding it for yourself. Oftentimes I'm humming, and I kind of have to fast forward through the tune quickly to find the... and there I was halfway through, so I would have a choice to keep going and make it a really long tag, basically playing half of the A part, that's fine, or to just kind of go with it. And so much of what works well is nonverbal communication, looking around. And so if I'm giving the people that I'm playing with a yep, let's do it, positive look, and looking ready, hopefully they'll pick up on the cues of, okay, no, I'm ready for us to jump into this tune, even though I might not have played the ending I expected. Again, practicing those endings does really help. And one big thing that I see people run into, and that I run into myself, is if we have the sheet music in front of us, we flip to that page, oh, there's those last 2 measures, okay, I will read them. Right? We expect that we'll just be able to look at it and play it with the same sort of rhythmic enthusiasm that we want the tune to have. If we're just jumping in mid-tune, the rhythm, the context of what's going on isn't there. I really think it's important to have the tune queued up in your ears. And if you want to look at the notes to help your fingers, that's great. But the tune needs to be in your ears and your fingers first before trying to launch into it like this. But those tags are great. Longer tags give people a little bit more of a sense of the rhythm. Longer tags give you a little bit more time to kind of find your groove. I will often find I start here and over the course of my 2 measures realize, oh, I got to bring it down a little bit, or ooh, I should bring it up. And so the tag is a good spot to do that. Be careful that you're not doing that tempo change right when you switch into the tune. Because because now I've told everyone to go one speed and I've switched up the speed on everyone. So try to avoid that. It's a good thing to practice getting more confident on a whole bunch of different tunes on your own. The other thing is, the longer the tag, the more time you have to feel nervous and anxious about doing it yourself, and then speed up to try to make it get over with, and now you've got the whole thing going too fast. So that's just one little inherent danger in going too fast. The other two perspectives I had for starting tunes is to just start playing it and people will trickle in, and that's fine in many contexts. Tunes do not have to have a strong, perfect, everybody in unison start. That's fine in many jam contexts. Just start playing it. And then my personal favorite, of course, is to pass the buck, is to look at someone else and say, hey, will you give me 4? And that's great if you trust them and you think that they'll give it to you at a tempo that feels good. When someone's doing that, they might, play bump, bump, bump on the piano. I generally am coming in not at the beginning of the tune on beat 1, but on beat 7 or 8 of their intro. So 1, 2, 3. And that's just because I really need my pickup notes to help the momentum of getting into the tune. So that may work well for you. That's a thing to try playing around with. And a metronome can do that for you at home too. You could just have that metronome click. 1, 2, 3. And there you go. So that's a whole bunch of tips for starting tunes out. Stopping tunes, equally as important, has its own little tricky things to it. There's the hup, the... As I mentioned in the little write-up that I did, it's worth practicing that noise at home by yourself or in the car. I've tried to do it a few times earlier in life and came out with a very feeble and unaudible sound. You gotta be pretty loud to cut through a whole bunch of fiddles and guitars and mandolins and maybe a bass and a piano too. But just some sort of a noise that really mostly just catches people's ears and they realize, oh, something's happening and we're close enough to the end that it might be there. Where that spot is, I would say, is probably halfway through the second B part, maybe a little further along into it. So that works well. That's about the same spot where I would kick my foot as well. I tend to like to do both. If I give a little shout out to everybody and people look around and then see my foot, that's a pretty, you can't of course see my foot, there's my foot for you. That's a pretty definitive sense of, oh, okay, we're ending, we're coming to the end here. And then there's a little bit of a lift in my bow that I'll do that I want to show because it's hard to explain. So fireman's reel, the B part halfway through goes kind of back to the A part. So I'm at that second half of the B part. Right, so I kind of fly off with the bow. And that's worth practicing on a bunch of different tunes in a bunch of different spots. It gets executed a little differently, of course, for every tune, but being able to come off the string, catch that moment of air, which, all your fellow musicians will hear that moment. What's going on? Oh, okay, we're ending. So get comfortable with that, and also, of course, getting comfortable coming back down onto the string if you're bowing. If you don't play a bowed instrument, maybe it's a little easier, maybe it's a little harder. I'm imagining on a woodwind, for example, that might be a more challenging thing to execute. I'm trying to run through that part of the tune again. You can kind of take a longer. A bunch of different ways that you could do that. But that's a pretty good spot to do it. Some people like to say, oh, let's do the tune 3 times through. That works well if you're switching tunes especially. I will still call hup if we're switching tunes. I won't put my foot out so much for a switch. This is kind of a universal switch symbol that sometimes you'll see people do if I'm playing. It's hard to do if I'm the only melody player, but this kind of a bow wobble in certain contexts will cue people that, oh, okay, we're going to switch tunes. And then There's a bunch of other nonverbal cues that I think are really strong indicators. You know, if you're looking around urgently at folks and opening your eyes and nodding your head, looking desperate, those all help cue in other musicians about what's happening. One thing I've run into is people who lift their foot just for enthusiasm. You do have to be aware sometimes of it. Are they just like kicking their heels up enthusiastically, or are they showing that the tune is coming to an end? So make sure to hold your foot for a little bit longer up, just to make it clear it's not just a foot twitch. So those are a few thoughts on ending tunes. And then a couple of thoughts on playing with others is, don't be afraid to trickle in. Don't be afraid to come in partway through an A part or partway through a tune. If someone is not feeling confident on the rhythm, chances are you joining them is not actually going to help. Maybe it will. I mean, if you're playing guitar or bass and you're feeling their rhythm just enough to really hold it tight for them, that is a huge help. But if one fiddle player is a little bit shaky on the rhythm, adding a few more shaky rhythms is not going to give us a strong foundation. So I'm often happy to just wait a little bit longer, or to kind of just come in with a really non-rhythmic drone. And sometimes just feeling that fuller sound of other people joining in will help that fiddle player have a bit more confidence and then kind of land into the rhythm they want to be in. You know, if someone else starts out the tune, right there is a lovely spot to come in. Or you could come in here. And here's fine too. You can come in somewhere in that second A part. Coming in at the beginning of the B part is very nice. For any rhythm player, kind of coming in with like a strum, and then another strum, and then kind of sinking into the rhythm, or even just doing a strum at the beginning of the measure all the way through an A part and coming in at the next A part or at the B part with a more steady boom chuck sort of a rhythm can be a really nice way of building. And these start to look like arrangements. It starts to sound like a really intentional way of building this tune up. And sometimes all it really is just kind of coming in a gentle way so that we're supporting but not disturbing that rhythm as it finds its groove and gets going. I often, when I jump in, will pause at a phrase and kind of lift my bow off and not play, just to make sure, okay, am I still really synced up with what everyone else is doing? Yep, and then I'll keep going with that melody. So that's a thing to consider, but being aware of what everyone else is doing around you. Looking at other people is so critical, so make sure you've got your eyes scanning the room, checking other people's feet. I rely heavily on other people's feet. I then am trying to match my foot up with them. I'm bobbing my head along with their feet as they're going. Playing with other people is challenging, especially when someone then isn't playing right on the rhythm and is doing something that's a little bit funky. So those are things to watch out for, but the more you're looking at them, the more you're really listening to them, the more you're engaged in the rhythm that you're feeling, the more likely that you can follow someone through whatever misstep or funny detour they may lead you on. So hopefully these are a few useful tips that you can integrate into your playing, both your practice at home to prepare and also in playing with other people.